Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The moment the monster's eyes snapped open, the air in the sterile, high-tech hospital suite turned to ice, and before I could even drop the sponge I was using to bathe him, a hand made of iron and sinew shot out, clamping around my throat with enough force to crush my windpipe. There was no grogginess, no slow return to consciousness. Only the immediate, lethal violence of a predator disturbed in its den. The heart monitor, which had beeped a steady, hypnotic rhythm for the last 365 days, suddenly screamed a frantic warning, mirroring the terror exploding in my chest. I clawed at the wrist holding me, my legs kicking uselessly against the side of the hospital bed, but the man who was supposed to be a vegetable, the man who was supposed to rot quietly while I lived off his fortune, was staring at me with irises the color of molten gold and a pupil blown wide with pure, unadulterated rage. "Who?" he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding against bone. "Sent you to finish the job?" To understand how I ended up pinned against a medical mattress by a man half the world believed was dead, you have to understand the desperation that smells like poverty. My name is Julian Vane, and a year ago, I was selling my plasma and skipping meals to keep my sister in dialysis. Then came the offer. The Draven family. Old money. Bloody money. They needed a spouse for the eldest son, Cashin Draven. Cashin was a legend in the corporate underworld, a ruthless, alpha personality who had doubled the family empire before his 30th birthday. But legends bleed like anyone else. A car bomb had left him in a coma with a prognosis that was grim at best. However, the Draven family trust had a peculiar, archaic stipulation. The head of the house must be married to retain control of the assets. If Cashin died single, the empire would be liquidated and split among a dozen vulture-like relatives. So they bought me. They didn't need a partner. They needed a placeholder. A breathing signature. I signed the contract, took the ring, and moved into the penthouse turned private ICU. My job was simple. Sit by the bed, look the part of the grieving husband, and collect a stipend that paid for the best doctors my sister could ever need. For a year, I lived in the shadow of a ghost. I read books to him. I wiped his brow. I changed the flowers. In the silence of the night, when the loneliness was suffocating, I confessed my secrets to him, treating him like a priest who could never give penance. I told him about my guilt, my fear, and how I hated his brother, Silas, who ran the company in Cashin's stead. I thought I was safe. I thought he was just a body. I was wrong. "Speak," Cashin growled, tightening his grip. My vision was spotting with black dots. I tapped his arm frantically, the universal signal for submission. He didn't let go, but he loosened his fingers just enough for air to wheeze into my starving lungs. "No one," I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. "No one sent me. I'm your husband." The silence that followed was heavier than the violence. Cashin blinked, the golden fire in his eyes dimming slightly as he processed the absurdity of my words. He looked at me, really looked at me, scanning my face, my trembling hands, the silk pajamas I wore that were far too expensive for a mere assassin. "Husband," he repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. He shoved me away, causing me to stumble back and crash into the tray of medical instruments. Scissors and forceps clattered to the marble floor. Cashin tried to sit up, but his muscles, atrophied from a year of disuse, failed him. He collapsed back against the pillows, his chest heaving, sweat beading on his forehead. But even in weakness, he radiated an aura of command that made my knees weak. "Explain," he ordered. "In 10 seconds. Before I find something sharp and open your throat." "The trust," I stammered, rubbing the bruising skin of my neck. "Your family. The trust requires you to be married to hold the assets. You were in a coma. They hired me. I signed the papers a year ago. I'm Julian." Cashin stared at the ceiling, a vein pulsing in his temple. He was putting the pieces together with terrifying speed. "A year," he whispered. "I've been under for a year." He turned his gaze back to me. It was clinical, stripping me bare. "And Silas?" "My brother. He's running Draven Corp," I said softly. He visits sometimes. He talks about selling the tech division." A dark, cruel smile twisted Cashin's lips. "Of course he does. And you? Have you been enjoying my money, Julian?" "I needed it. I said, lifting my chin. I wouldn't lie to him. My sister is sick. I sold my life to save hers. But I haven't hurt you. I've cared for you every day. Cashin's eyes narrowed. I know. The admission stunned me. I wasn't gone, Julian, he said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly intimate register. Not the whole time. It was like being underwater. I heard voices. I heard your voice. He shifted, grimacing as pain shot through his stiff limbs. I heard you crying about the thunderstorms. I heard you reading poetry that I detested. And I heard you tell me that Silas switched my medication. My blood ran cold. 2 weeks ago, I had noticed Silas tampering with the 4-bag. I had switched it back immediately, terrified of being caught, and whispered my suspicion to the sleeping Cashin. You saved me, Cashin murmured, the golden intensity of his gaze pinning me to the spot. If you hadn't swapped that bag, I would be dead. That is the only reason you are still breathing. He held out a hand. It was trembling, but the demand was clear. He wanted me to come closer. Fear told me to run. Instinct told me that running from a man like Cashin Draven only made you prey. I stepped forward, taking his large, calloused hand in mine. His skin was fever hot. You are going to help me, Julian, he said. It wasn't a question. No one knows I'm awake. Not the doctors, not the nurses, and certainly not my brother. You are going to be my hands and legs until I can stand on my own. And if I refuse, you're my husband, he smirked, a dangerous glint in his eye. Till death do us part. And I can arrange the parting very quickly. The next 2 weeks were a blur of tension and clandestine rehabilitation. The dynamic of the room shifted entirely. Before, I was the caretaker of a statue. Now, I was the servant of a tyrant. Cashin was a demanding, insatiable patient. He forced himself through agonizing exercises, pushing his body to the brink of collapse to regain his strength. I had to help him stand, his heavy weight draped over my shoulders, his breath hot against my ear as he cursed his own weakness. We developed a rhythm. During the day, when the nurses or Silas visited, Cashin played the role of the vegetable perfectly. He went limp, his breathing shallow, his face a mask of slack unconsciousness. But the moment the door clicked shut, the alpha woke up. Lock the door, he would command. I became his spy. I stole documents from Silas's briefcase when he left it unattended in the foyer. I recorded conversations on my phone. And every night, I reported back to Cashin. We were co-conspirators, bound by a secret that could get us both killed. But there was something else growing in the pressurized atmosphere of that room. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled over the city, the kind that used to make me curl up in a chair and weep. A crack of thunder shook the windows, and I flinched, dropping the tablet I was holding. Come here, Cashin said from the bed. I hesitated. He was sitting up, propped against the headboard, reading the financial reports I had pilfered. He looked stronger now. The hollows in his cheeks had filled in. The muscles in his arms were regaining their definition. Julian, he warned. I walked to the side of the bed. Without looking up from the papers, he reached out and wrapped his hand around my wrist. His thumb rubbed slow, soothing circles over my pulse point. Sit, he said, nodding to the space beside him on the mattress. I sat, stiff and wary. The thunder cracked again, closer this time. Cashin didn't let go. He anchored me. The warmth of his body, the scent of him, sandalwood and antiseptic, was overwhelming. Why do you hate the storms? He asked quietly. My parents died in a flood, I whispered. The sound. It reminds me of the water rising. Cashin finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable, but his grip on my wrist tightened, pulling me closer until my shoulder brushed his. The water won't reach you here, he said low and deep, a vibration that went straight to my spine. I am the only thing you need to fear, and I protect what is mine. Mine. The word hung in the air, heavy and possessive. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a strange, liquid heat that pooled in my stomach. I looked at his lips, remembering how cruel they could be, and wondered how they would feel against mine. He saw the look. His eyes darkened, the pupils dilating. He leaned in, his hand moving from my wrist to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. You're staring, little husband. Do you know what happens, he murmured, his face inches from mine, when a man wakes up after a year of starvation? He wants to feast. Before I could answer, the door handle rattled. Cashin threw himself back against the pillows instantly, his eyes closing, his face going slack. I scrambled off the bed, smoothing my pajamas, my heart racing so fast I thought I would faint. The door opened. It was Silas. He wasn't alone. 2 men in dark suits flanked him. "Leave us, Julian," Silas said, his voice oily and dismissive. I need to change his sheets," I stammered, blocking his path. "Dr. Eris said he needs rest." "Get out," Silas snapped, shoving past me. He walked to the bedside and looked down at his brother. I saw Cashin's hand, hidden under the sheet, clench into a fist. "It's a shame," Silas sighed, pulling a syringe from his jacket pocket. "The board is getting restless, Cashin. They want closure. A tragic heart failure seems appropriate for a man in your condition." My breath hitched. He wasn't just tampering with meds anymore. He was ending it. "No," I screamed, lunging forward. One of the bodyguards caught me, twisting my arm behind my back. I cried out in pain, but my eyes were fixed on Silas, who was uncapping the needle. "Don't worry, Julian," Silas sneered, glancing back at me. "You'll be a very wealthy widow. Just keep your mouth shut, and you'll live." He turned back to Cashin and aimed the needle at the foreport. "Cashin!" I screamed, desperate, hopeless. And then, the dragon moved. As Silas reached for the tube, Cashin's hand shot out, seizing Silas's wrist. The snap of bone breaking was sickeningly loud. Silas shrieked, dropping the syringe. Cashin sat up, the 4 lines ripping from his arm, blood spraying onto the pristine white sheets. He didn't look like an invalid. He looked like the god of war. "You should have made sure I was dead, brother," Cashin roared. He yanked Silas forward, slamming his head into the metal bed rail. Silas crumbled to the floor, unconscious. The bodyguards froze, stunned by the resurrection. "Let him go," Cashin commanded, his voice thundering through the room. He stood up, unsteady but fueled by adrenaline and rage. He grabbed a heavy glass vase from the bedside table and smashed it, holding a jagged shard like a dagger. "Let my husband go, or I will paint this room with your insides." The guards looked at the fallen Silas, then at the demonic figure of Cashin Draven, dripping blood and radiating murder. They released me and backed away, hands raised. "Get out," Cashin snarled. "Tell the board I'm coming for them." They fled, dragging Silas's limp body with them. The moment the door closed, Cashin swayed. I rushed to him, catching him as his knees buckled. We collapsed onto the blood-spattered bed, a tangle of limbs and heavy breathing. "You're bleeding," I gasped, trying to stem the flow from where the IVs had ripped out. Cashin ignored the blood. He grabbed my face with both hands, smearing red across my cheek. His eyes were wild, exhilarating. "Did they hurt you?" he demanded, scanning me for injuries. "I'm fine," I sobbed, the adrenaline crashing into hysteria. "Cashin, you're crazy. You could have died. I told you." He panted, pulling me so close that our chests were flush. "I protect what is mine." Then he kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It was a seal on a contract that had suddenly become very real. His lips were demanding, tasting of iron and fury. I melted into him, my hands clutching his shoulders, surrendering to the storm I had been living with for a year. He pushed me down onto the mattress, his weight heavy and grounding. The power dynamic had shifted again. There were no secrets left. No pretense. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against mine, his golden eyes burning into my soul. "The contract is void," he whispered roughly. "We aren't doing this for the trust anymore. You aren't a placeholder, Julian. You're the other half of my empire." He kissed the pulse point on my neck, right where he had choked me 2 weeks ago. "And tonight," he growled against my skin, "I'm going to show you exactly what it means to be married to a Draven." I shivered, but this time, it wasn't from cold. It was from the thrill of knowing that the monster was awake, and he was entirely, irrevocably mine. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, turning a cage into a kingdom. If you enjoyed seeing Julian embrace his destiny and the deliciously dark possessiveness of Cashin, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who tried to kill you in the first 5 minutes of meeting him? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,